All right, hello again. This is Mr. Weber, and this is video lecture number 5 for AP US History. We are today talking about rival imperial models, different models that 3 specific European nations used whenever they came to colonize the New World. 3 sections today. We are going to have New Spain, and their model was colonization and conversion. New France, whose model involved fur traders and missionaries. And New Netherlands, and their model involved simply commerce. So let's begin. Early Spanish efforts at colonization and exploration were centered in the Caribbean and in Mesoamerica. The Spanish conquistadors were primarily interested in finding precious metals and establishing domination over subject peoples, although sometimes that led to their extermination. Few Spaniards were interested in living in the New World. Spain's empire, by and large, did not consist of settler colonies. At first, only isolated expeditions penetrated North America, motivated mainly by the search for gold and missionary activity. In the latter part of the 15th century, however, the Spanish treasure fleet came under attack from English and French privateers who used the South Atlantic coast as a base of operations. In response, Spain expanded its military presence in Florida, establishing St. Augustine. Similar security concerns led the Spanish friars to the northern borderlands of Mexico, or New Mexico. Like the Spanish, then, the French were uninterested in settling their New World holding Canada with colonists. Rather, as French adventurers explored the St. Lawrence and Mississippi waterways, they established an extensive fur trade with the native inhabitants, while Jesuits sought Indian conversions to Christianity. The English were different. While their earlier colonies, like those of the French and the Dutch, were established by private commercial enterprises with support from the Crown, the first of these, the Virginia Company, floundered about aimlessly in its very first few years. It soon discovered, though, that the best way to make its enterprise successful was to expand its concerns and become a settler colony. While the company itself subsequently lost control of its creation, Virginia began to prosper as a settler colony in which white planters and their indentured servants expropriated land from the native inhabitants and developed a plantation economy built around tobacco. So let's take a good close look now at our 3 different models we're talking about today. New Spain, France, and the Netherlands. So let's start with Spain. Spanish adventurers were the first Europeans to explore the southern and the western United States. By the 1560s, their main goal was to prevent other Europeans from establishing settlements. In 1565, Spain established St. Augustine, which was the first permanent European settlement in America. Most of Spain's other military outposts were destroyed by Indian attacks. In response to the Indian attacks, the Spanish adopted something called the Comprehensive Orders for New Discoveries in 1573, and they also employed missionaries. For Franciscans, these missionaries, religious conversion and assimilation went hand in hand, but Spanish rule was not benevolent. Protected by Spanish soldiers, missionaries whipped Indians who continued to practice polygamy. They smashed religious idols and severely punished those who worshipped traditional gods. Most Native Americans tolerated the Franciscans, but when Christian prayers failed to do some things that they wanted, that they needed, when it failed to prevent disease, drought, and Apache raids, many returned to their ancestral religions and they blamed the Spanish for their ills. Santa Fe was established in 1610 by the Spanish, who reestablished the system of missions and forced labor there after Indian revolts in 1598. Forced labor, the imposition of Christianity, drought, and food shortages motivated the Indian shaman Popé in 1680 to lead the peoples of 24 pueblos in a carefully coordinated rebellion known as the Pueblo Revolt, which killed over 400 Spaniards. Exhausted by a generation of warfare, the Pueblos, a decade later, joined with the Spanish to end up, they protected their lands against nomadic Indians. Spain maintained its northern empire, but did not achieve religious conversion or cultural assimilation of the Native Americans. The costs of expansion in Florida and New Mexico delayed the Spanish settlement of California, which they eventually did. Okay, our next section then is New France. We're talking about fur traders and missionaries. Quebec, which was established in 1608, was the first permanent French settlement. New France became a vast fur trading empire. The Huron, in exchange for protection from the Iroquois, allowed French traders into their territory. French traders set in motion a series of devastating Indian wars over the fur market, which was extensive. And they also brought disease to the Indians, and it's a similar story. It killed much of the native population. Beginning in the 1640s, the New York Iroquois seized control of the fur trade, and they forced the Huron to migrate to the north and to the west. The Iroquois then organized themselves into a confederation of 5 nations: the Senecas, the Cayugas, the Onondagas, the Oneidas, and the Mohawks. And they did this to extend control over territory and extend their control of the fur trade. Conflicts with the French over control of this fur trade severely reduced the Iroquois population during the late 1600s, despite their alliance with the English. While fur traders amassed furs for France, French priests sought converts. Unlike the Spanish, though, French missionaries did not use Indians for forced labor. This is an important distinction. They won religious converts by addressing the needs of the Indians and trying to help the Indians out. Okay, New Netherland is our next section. Commerce. The Dutch Republic in 1600 emerged as the financial and commercial hub of Northern Europe. The Dutch colonization strategy emphasized commerce over religious conversion. They didn't care about the religion as much as the others. In 1621, the West India Company created a trade monopoly in West Africa, Indonesia, and Brazil, giving the Dutch complete control of the Atlantic slave trade. In 1624, the company founded the town of New Amsterdam. And this was on Manhattan as the capital of New Netherland. To encourage migration, the company granted huge estates along the Hudson River to wealthy Dutchmen, but this really attracted only just a few settlers. New Netherland failed as a settler colony, but flourished very briefly in fur trading. When the Dutch seized prime farming land from the Algonquins and took over their trading network, the Algonquins responded with force. The West India Company largely ignored the floundering Dutch settlement, and they concentrated instead on the profitable importation of African slaves, of course, to their sugar plantations in Brazil. The Dutch ruled New Amsterdam to garner short-term profits, rejecting requests for representative government, and after lightly resisting an English invasion in 1664, New Amsterdam eventually happily accepted English rule. Initially, the Duke of York ruled the new English colony of New York with a mild hand. After a Dutch raid in 1673, English officials eventually imposed English law and customs. So this concludes video lecture number 5, which is rival imperial models. We looked at New Spain, New France, and New Netherlands, different models, of course, with colonization, conversion, the way they treated the Indians, their importance that they placed on religion, and the importance that they placed on, of course, making money. Please address the review questions at the bottom of the page that you see here, and read the corresponding section.